Hey everybody, welcome to Black Lotus Live, where we talk about all things strange. And tonight we are going to be talking about what's commonly known as the missing 411 instances. And what that is people who have just literally vanished in national forests, and there's no real explanation for it. So we have Anthony from Unidentified S4 with us, and he seems to know quite a lot about this. So, hi, Anthony. How are you?
Good evening, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me. Happy Easter.
Welcome.
Happy Easter, too.
I love your ears, Terry.
Thanks. Had to be a little goofy today.
Was that you leaving Easter baskets in my living room this morning?
That was me.
I'd recognize those ears anywhere.
So, yeah, let's get into this. Literally thousands upon thousands of people go missing every year. And a good majority of them go missing in the America's national forests. A lot of them are found, whether dead or alive. But there's a good amount of people that have never been found, and people just don't know what happened to them. There's no sign of foul play. There's no sign of being eaten by an animal or anything like that. They're just gone. And this is a subject that's kind of fascinated me for a while. We watched that movie by David Paulides called Missing 411. And that one was all about children who have gone missing. And Victoria and I were just chatting about this pre-show. And one of the things that really bothered us was this 2-year-old vanished. And he and his family were out in the woods and just hiking along, and suddenly he's gone. And what irritated us about this is, how would you let a 2-year-old out of your sight? And especially when they said that they left him with his grandfather, who was probably inebriated, in my opinion. I mean, as a parent, how dumb do you have to be? I just don't get it. I get that if it was an older child, maybe 10, 12 years old, you could probably let him out of your sight for a minute. But a 2-year-old, a toddler? But anyway, that movie, Missing 411, was all about children that have gone missing in the national forests. Today, I watched another documentary with David Paulides, and it was about, he focused on 2 adults, both of whom were seasoned hikers, and they've never found these people. 2 separate incidents, by the way. One happened at Mount Shasta, where I think there's a lot of weird activity at Mount Shasta. And the other one was, I can't remember the name of it. But anyway,
It'll come to you later.
yeah. But that one was more interesting to me because Missing 411 didn't touch upon anything paranormal. At one point, he mentions that some people think it's Bigfoot, and that's all he says. This Vanished, which is playing on Pluto TV, by the way, dabbled with the idea that these people have vanished because of portals and possibly wormholes. Because some people who have come back from this report going to another realm. Some people come back and they don't remember anything. They don't realize how long they've been gone, nothing. Some people have come back stark naked and they have no idea why. And so, yeah, I really find this whole subject very interesting, very curious. Anthony, what do you think?
Well, to touch on that, there was this specific case in Missing 411 where the guy let his kids go with the neighbor out to the woods for the day on a hike. And they were just ahead of the child, just by a couple feet. And when they turned around again, the child was gone. They came back down to the cabin, told the father that the child was missing. The dad ran back up to the woods with everybody. They began to search. They couldn't find anything. And this went on for days. The state police came in. Hound dogs came in. They searched this area up and down for weeks. I think the kid was like 4 or 6 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And it was 3? Okay. And a couple weeks later, they ended up, now, mind you, they searched this area, I don't know how many times, but a couple of weeks later, they ended up finding the kids' clothes in a spot that had been searched, I don't know, 10, 14 times already. They walked over that same spot searching the area. So how did something like that happen? As an ex-cop, how do you walk over a search area and comb that area in a grid search multiple times and find nothing? Then a couple of weeks go by and you find the clothes, just placed over there on the rocks, completely visible, where not only one person would be able to see, but multiple people and a search party would be able to see, because basically you're, hands width apart from each other when you're searching. And usually you walk with a stick and you overturn every rock and leaf and everything in that area to close off that grid. And then on their way back, they do the same grid search pattern again to double check the area. And that's one pass forward and back. They did multiple. So that's very strange. It blows me away. I would love to get some closure on that for these families, but it's absolutely fascinating. You bring up portals, wormholes. Could it be? It could be, very plausible.
I'll tell you what. I've always been a believer in the flesh and blood theory about Bigfoot. And when I first started hearing about people talk about the idea that they're interdimensional beings, I kind of went, oh, pish posh. Yeah, I don't buy it. I think I'm changing my idea about that, though. Because there have been instances where people say that they've seen Bigfoot. He walks behind a tree and he's gone. So I wonder if Sasquatch had the ability to control these wormholes, these portals, and possibly they could be interdimensional. And I think that's what's happening with these people who turn up missing.
Are you thinking that like this? I'm sorry. Do you think like the Sasquatch is taking them, doing something, and then bringing them back, or
I don't think it's necessarily just Sasquatch. I think they are alien beings who have the ability to manipulate these things and transfer these people into other dimensions. And possibly that's why, like Anthony was saying, later on, the clothing shows up because possibly it's not needed.
But why would the clothing all of a sudden show up? Why? It's not like, something Bigfoot would come and take the child, strip him naked, and then go back and put the clothes back.
Could it be for closure? Like Okay, stop looking. Here's his clothes. Go on now.
Possible. What about that other young boy that went missing overnight in the rainstorm, and it was freezing cold out in the woods? He was like a 2-year-old kid. And when the cops asked him, where were you? What went on? They were trying to talk to this little boy, and he said that the bear kept him warm and safe for the 2 nights in the rainstorm. And the temperature in the woods dropped down to 38 degrees one night in a rainstorm. Right. And this kid's talking about a bear that saved him and kept him warm and brought him back. A bear. So, a little 2-year-old, 3-year-old kid's not going to know what Bigfoot is, but he'll probably associate a primate like that's bipedal to a bear, maybe. And it could very well be a species like that.
Or if you saw Star Wars, the first thing I thought of was
Chewbacca, right?
Yeah, I forgot it.
Yeah.
I'm not a Star Wars fan. But, it could be something as simple as, being transported like Star Trek, because, I do Star Trek. It's not necessarily interdimensional or portal or anything. It could be, technology where, let me just take this child real quick, because I do think those children were taken. And that, I was telling Al before, I watched the Missing 411 and I was infuriated. And I couldn't watch the whole thing. It's like, you don't let your children, even if they're with a friend, My daughter's almost 30 and I still track her.
I was just going to say, my son's 17 and I know his every move, Yep.
Yeah, I still track her. So, it doesn't matter. It's not mom spying on you or trying to control you. It's for your own safety. You need to let somebody know where you are.
Absolutely.
I tell not weird people. I tell my friends, hey, I'm over here now. I just want somebody to know where I'm at.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Well, I do the same thing. It's like when I go to see my daughter, she's like a 40-minute drive away. And it's like, I'll get there and then I send Damien a message, hey, I made it. And when I get back home, I send my daughter a message, hey, I'm back, just so you know that I traveled and I made it. Okay.
Of course.
It's just kind of one of those
common
courtesy. Well, and common courtesy too, because, we don't want to worry about our loved ones and our friends and things like that. So, yeah, but I find it really weird that these kids are getting sight like that.
Well, and the thing that makes me wonder is when you're talking about some seasoned hikers, like this one guy, honestly, I can't remember his name. He was a seasoned hiker. He walked everywhere. He developed the nickname Walking Man, and he was with his wife and his kid, and he wanted to go down and see these hieroglyphs. Or petroglyphs, rather, at this one area. And it wasn't very far. It was maybe a half a mile away, if that. And so he tells his wife, I'm going to go down there. And she says, well, let me get you some water. He says, it's right there. I don't need water. So he goes down there and suddenly she can't see him anymore. And there was a report that he came across, that he started hiking on a different trail and came across these other hikers. And that's the last time he was seen. Now, how does a seasoned hiker, why would a seasoned hiker do that sort of thing, first of all? And again, not telling your wife exactly where you're going to go. So, but he's never been found.
And that's an ongoing occurrence. Kids have been ahead of their parents by just a few strides or behind their parents by just a few strides. And the parent turns around or looks ahead to see where the child went and they're gone. They're absolutely gone. One parent goes this way, the other goes this way down the hill, and they're nowhere to be found. They didn't fall down the side of the hill. Search and rescue teams comb these areas and there's nothing to be found.
Right.
It's very odd.
Some of these places at these national forests, they have high cliffs. So, I can understand if some, accidents happen, somebody slips and they fall down, but a body is never found. That's why I really think
you never hear somebody scream either. Husband walking with a wife and then turns around, she's gone. He didn't hear her scream, like if she would have fell off the side of the cliff or anything like that, or the hill. I mean, surely dropping down, from altitude like that off the side of a mountain or a cliff, you would break a bone, or somebody would scream or shout for help or whatever have you, right? I mean, it's only common to do, I mean, in that kind of situation, but they never hear anything. They're always gone without a trace.
Yeah.
And if they would have seen Bigfoot, or if somebody would have taken them, you think they would have screamed as well. So it wouldn't have just been that, that random.
Yeah.
Right.
When I lived in Arizona, I used to always go hiking, and there was this one, and I got ripped another one because I would go by myself. And after I got yelled at, I quit doing it. Or I would call somebody. I'd be on top of a mountain. I'd call somebody, "Hey, I'm on top of a mountain now." But there was this one place up in the McDowell Mountains that had abandoned mine shafts and petroglyphs, and I always wanted to go up there. But there were warnings: don't go up there. The ground is not stable. But I always wanted to go. So it could be something as simple as that. You poof, fall through the ground and you hit your head or something.
Through.
And then,
Yeah.
Right, but a lot of these places don't have crevasses.
But this wouldn't either. This was just the ground was not stable because there was a cave system underneath, and if you could walk along, poof. But my other thought was, how many of these places where people are disappearing have perhaps names like Devil's Ridge or Demon's, Trail or something like that? Because I heard a lot of people are disappearing.
Like quite a few.
Yeah. So why aren't people paying attention to that? I mean, that's a red flag right there.
Well, yeah, a lot of these places, the Native American tribes consider them to be sacred, and especially where you get above the tree line. They consider that area sacred, and they don't go up there unless it's absolutely necessary. So there may be some truth behind that they're forbidden places.
Yeah, one of the places I actually hiked up in Arizona, it was above the tree line. Well, there were no trees. Okay, above the cactus line. And it was called the Equestrian Trail. And I'm thinking, how beautiful. I bet you see wild horses there. But no, it was actually an equestrian trail. So I was climbing over boulders and stuff. So you need to pay attention to these signs, literally.
I looked into this, and we live in Las Vegas, and one of the most prevalent places where people have gone missing is right here at Lake Mead.
Lake Mead, sure.
National Forest. And if you know Lake Mead area, it's not heavily wooded, and there's not a lot of, like hills and that kind of thing. We're in the middle of a desert, but I read that over 500 people have gone missing there.
Wow.
Never to be found. Never to be found.
Oh,
And how much do you think any of that's in the water? Have gone in the lake?
I think it's entirely possible, but you'd think that they would drag it.
I was just going to say that. You can always drag the lake and send divers in, you know what I mean? To comb. But when you're out in the wilderness looking for something, that's a totally different ball game. Bloodhounds are usually sent in. They're usually given a piece of clothing. They pick up on a scent and then they go and they take the guys with them on a search. Water is totally different type of rescue operation. Like Damien said, you would have to either send divers in or dredge the lake to comb for a survivor or something like that. But these cases, like that little boy that was at the lake with his grandfather and his parents that left him with the grandfather fishing, they were only half a mile away from him at the lake. So it was between the creek and the lake. However big that distance wasn't much, and the kid went missing in between the grandfather and the parents within that little half-mile stretch. That little 2-year-old kid disappeared. Where could he have gone? Because around the creek where the grandfather was, it was all open area when they showed you the video, and the wood line didn't start for 500 to 800 feet, and then the parents were inside that area by the lake. Inside the wooded area, maybe another 30, 40 feet in. So where could that kid have gone? If he walked away from his grandfather, you would think, maybe he walked to his parents. Why would he disappear in the woods and nobody would find him? Or it's just so odd. And there was
Yes.
other people there with the family, and nobody noticed anything. You're talking vanishing without a trace, which is really spooky.
It really is, and it's a scary thought that this could happen to anybody, you know. Um,
Well,
But,
chickens
yeah,
especially, yeah. A lot of times
Yeah.
they're invisible, because they're little and they're not engaged in
Sure.
the conversation or anything, and people just don't notice children.
Yeah.
Some people.
Yeah.
Those of us who are, moms are like, "Where's my child?"
It makes me think of ships and stuff that all of a sudden the whole crew has just disappeared, and the plates and stuff are still sitting there like they were sitting down having dinner, yet there's nobody left aboard of a whole ship, and there's no sign of any foul play or anything.
Good point.
Ghost ship.
Well, and entire ships as
Right.
well, not just the crew.
Just the ship too, right?
Like for instance, in the Bermuda Triangle, there are a lot of instances like that, and so I'm opening my mind to the real possibility that we have portals and wormholes that are popping up in certain places. Look at the amount of people that go missing in the Alaska Triangle and the Nevada Triangle as well.
And the Bermuda Triangle and the Dragon Triangle.
Right. And I think, well, for instance, like in the Alaska Triangle and the Nevada Triangle, there's a lot of drug crime going on up there, especially at around Mount Shasta. And so I'm thinking that I think some of it can be attributed to foul play, and the people who wind up missing in that area are buried in somebody's basement. However, that doesn't account for all of it.
Right, all of it, right.
What's interesting is the Bermuda Triangle, the Dragon Triangle, and I was just looking at the Nevada Triangle. They're like all roughly along the 30-degree latitude line.
Odd.
So many triangles are. Yeah. What's going on?
We had Fred Roll on with us, who lives in Alaska, and we were talking about that. And he said that there is a lot of drug crime up there. And he said, it could be accounted for that, and not possibly Bigfoot. But Bigfoot in Alaska is very different from the Bigfoot we have in the lower 48 states here.
Very aggressive.
Very, very aggressive. Yeah. He recounted a tale that he experienced where these Sasquatch came to his cabin and started banging on the walls. And he said that he had an up-close encounter with one of them through his window, and it was staring directly at him. And he immediately pulled out a shotgun and shot through the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it didn't
He
phase
did the same thing.
Yeah. And he said it didn't phase it at all. And so, yeah, these are very aggressive Bigfoot. So I think that some of the missing people in Alaska can be attributed to that. And he was saying they probably eat the bones and all. And
I wouldn't doubt it.
But so that's why you don't find them. But down
Wouldn't
here,
you still find blood though?
Say again.
I'm sorry. Wouldn't you still see like blood or something like that?
Well, not according to him. He was saying that, they don't waste anything, including blood, that they drink the blood.
And from what I understand, talking to Todd Standing for the past couple of months, the Bigfoot, when they hunt for deer or whatever, they'll break a limb on the animal, and they'll take the deer or whatever, and they'll break its limb, and they'll toss it up into a tree where no other animal would think to go find it, and then they'll come back later on and take it. So it's very possible if you're, because there are stories about Bigfoot abducting people. It's more common than you think. These stories they have been around for quite a while. There was a story of a boyfriend and girlfriend that were up camping, and kept getting their tent touched. So they came out of the tent. They were looking with flashlights, and the Bigfoot grabbed the girl and took off with her. And she happened to have like a little, keychain knife on her, and she kept stabbing the thing as it was running with her. And finally, it dropped her, and she took off, which was her story. But there's multiple stories of people being taken by Bigfoot. It goes all the way back to Native American stories about Bigfoot taking people and running with them, and for whatever reason. But they do. It is common. It is common to hear about that. So it's very plausible that it could happen.
It could be a combination of every theory that we can come up with.
That too.
I mean, we don't know. There's that many people disappearing.
You know what I was just thinking about? You said the Bigfoot or Sasquatch up in Alaska is more aggressive than what we have down here in the 48. What if the Bigfoot or whatever Sasquatch up in Alaska really isn't Bigfoot, but it's something like a Nephilim who's wearing fur clothing because it's cold there? Because that would explain the cannibalism, the eating everything, the more aggressive nature.
What did you think it was?
I honestly don't think so, because the reports out of Alaska, people say that it makes a noise that is unlike any other animal. And if it was a Nephilim, I don't think a Nephilim would make that kind of noise. I think it would sound more human, But
we were just talking on my show. I was cutting wood, and I had my GoPro on. I turned it on because I heard like strange howls a couple times. So I turned the GoPro on, and I'm cutting the wood. And then I recorded something, screaming in the woods to the far left of me. And then I'm cutting and I'm looking all over the place. And then something to the far right of me screamed back at the other. But it was so loud. I said it was like holding a speaker to your chest with the volume and the bass all the way up and feeling the percussion from it in your chest. And this thing had to be, it was way off whatever it was. But having a cabin up in Pennsylvania and being surrounded by nothing for, wilderness for 100 acres, no neighbors, no nothing, you get so used to the wildlife out there, the deer, the way the wolves sound, chipmunks walking through the leaves. You get used to all these different sounds. And I've never heard anything like that before. That's why I recorded it. It was so wild, and I was playing it for everybody. But to say it's Bigfoot, people think you're nuts. But it's very possible that it could be an unknown primate that's gone undetected for this long. Look how many scientists we have now. Dr. Jeff Meldrum from Ohio State. He's an anthropologist. He's studying the way the foot, the way it flexes, the mid-tarsal break on the footprint. And if somebody was hoaxing that, he was saying, how would they know about the mid-tarsal break in the foot? They've only become aware about that in like the past 10 years. That's become known to primatologists that there's a mid-tarsal break in the foot on these animals. So, who the hell knows what's going on? There very well could be a big primate out there like Sasquatch, because you go out into the woods. How many times have you gone out to the woods? Like I said, you never find bear bones, or you won't find wolf bones or anything. The forest eats everything up, bones, skin, everything. It only takes a month and a half or so, and everything turns back into dirt again. So if you're not out there, as soon as something's killed fresh, all the other wildlife gets to it really quick. They had a video on YouTube. A guy put a deer carcass out in the woods, and he filmed it for like 72 hours. When he came back in 72 hours, there was almost nothing left. Then he let it go for another 3 days, and the bones were almost gone. So just imagine if a Bigfoot died, who's to say, A, they don't bury their own, or B, the carcass will only take, 2 or 3 months to fully dissolve back into the earth. So it is plausible that these things do exist. And there's enough sustenance for these things in the woods. You have water, you have berries, all the different types of plants and fish and wildlife out there throughout the year, throughout all the different seasons. There's all these things out there to sustain an 800 to 1,200 pound animal. Look how big black and brown bears get. They get, and grizzly bears, they get massive. And if they can sustain out there, so can something of that size too in stature.
Right.
You were speaking about their vocal cords. And I don't know if you've ever heard this tape, but I think it's called the Sierra Sounds tape. I listened to this, and thinking back on it, I still get chills down my spine because it just sounded so foreign. You know,
Enzo Sorrell was just talking about that on the show, and then it hit me. Oh, that's them talking gibberish, and I played it while I was waiting to come on your show again to freshen up on it. They're literally having a conversation with each other. These animals, and it's almost a language. I mean, it has vowels and pronouns. You hear they're articulating words, their own words, but they are articulating words. And then the guy was saying that when they broke down the speech with a linguist, he said there's no way a human being can make these sounds with the vocal cords that we have. It would have to be vocal cords, 3 or 4 times our size and length to articulate what they were articulating with their speech pattern. So that's pretty wild too when you think about it.
So it's also, the theory has also been posited that Sasquatch are not only very intelligent, but they're psychic, and they can tell a human being for upwards to a mile away, and so they distance themselves from us. And the reason they distance themselves is because they know how we are, and so that's why you only see Sasquatch on rare occasions. But the theory also posits that they want to live in harmony with us. But until they see us not being so barbaric to other animals, then they're not going to be. So I have an idea that they are using portals to go to other dimensions. They are burying their dead, if need be, out in the middle of the wilderness where people don't normally go, or they're burying them in caves. There's a huge cave system in America. So, yeah.
A friend of mine told me he's up in like Illinois or Minnesota, somewhere up there. But there is a Native American legend or story or myth or whatever you want to call it that says that Bigfoot and the coyotes actually work in conjunction with each other, like the coyotes are the scouts, kind of, or wolves, I think is what it was. Have you heard that also?
I have not. And I lived in Minnesota. I don't recall.
I've never heard that theory before.
Yeah, and it's something because there have been actually Yeti sightings or Sasquatch. Or when I'm here in Texas, and when they were building the facility I was working in, this was very, very heavily forested. And when they were building it, the overnight security guard actually saw a Yeti or a Sasquatch. And he reported it. And then I was telling my friend that, and I was like, yeah, the craziest things I ever heard were the wolves when they were out here. And he's like, well, they're in cahoots. They kind of work together. So,
yeah. I've heard stories where the Sasquatch can mimic pretty much any animal in the forest, right down to small birds making very small chirping sounds. I've heard stories about that as well. So, who's to say? And I've also heard stories from different researchers that the Bigfoots, they stay in small packs. So let's say the whole northwest of the United States, maybe there's only 300-400 of them total. And they stay in small groups of, 4 to 6, let's say. And one of them stays up during the day while the other ones rest. They call it the day watcher. And that one sits up high and watches everything for miles to see what's coming into their territory. That's why you see all those, the tree breaks. Those tree breaks allegedly mean, if it's broken this way, don't go left. This is our territory. Or if it's broken the opposite way, don't go right. Or if they have a cross, don't go through. Like, it's their own language. And they also say that they leave gifts, for people. Like, you leave them an apple, they'll stack up rocks for you as a thank you. I've heard all these weird stories like that. And the best, I'll go back to this guy. I think his work is phenomenal, Todd. He's the only guy I've ever seen get an up-close photo of one of them. Real or not, I don't know, but that's
Wow.
he says that that's the Sasquatch photo that he took, and he calls this guy Jake. So that's
Yeah, I've seen that one before.
pretty wild. If that's real, could you imagine running into that in the woods? 50 miles away from civilization, up in a mountain, and then next thing you know, you're surrounded by these things because you're in their territory. Forget it. I would curl up in a ball because no 45 caliber handgun is taking that thing down. Those things are massive. Massive.
Has he seen? Did he see Jake more than once, or was it just that one time?
No, he has a lot of video footage. He's seen him about 4 or 5 times, and then he took footage of a female that he calls Jane, which he says is his sister, but he don't know for sure. He thinks they're just in the same tribe, and he's seen them too. More than 3 or 4 times a piece now. But we're talking about a guy that goes into the middle of nowhere in Canada, and he stays out there for months and does his research by himself. So who's to say what he ran into or hasn't run into? Who's to judge? It's got very, very compelling footage of things running up alongside mountains that your best sprinter in the Olympics couldn't do on the side of a mountain with shale rock and mud like that. So
I think I recall a documentary that was made about this guy.
Oh yeah, he has quite a few out. Discovering Bigfoot.
That's it.
He was also on Survivor Man. The guy Todd. Yeah.
If they like apples and stuff, I'm in good company because I'm always feeding the wildlife out here. But no one has stuck up rocks for us or anything yet, so I'm feeling good about this.
Well, maybe this summer you get a Bigfoot for company.
Yeah, Fred Roll was talking about gifting, and he says he doesn't believe in doing that, especially up in Alaska with the aggressive Sasquatch.
Being aggressive, I wouldn't leave them anything.
And he said there's no making friends with these things, Do
you think they're like 2 different tribes or 2 different species or 2 different?
I believe so.
Groups?
I believe so too. Yeah.
That's interesting.
And there are reports of Sasquatch and Sasquatch-like creatures all over the place. And, they all look kind of different, depending on their environment. So, yeah, I do believe that they are different species.
Right. Down in Florida, you have the skunk ape, which is a little smaller and totally different climate that it's in, warmth. Then you have Alaska, where they're supposed to be even more massive than they are, and like upstate New York and Pennsylvania and Ohio and all those other territories. So maybe they're different species break-offs of them. Maybe in Florida it's one type of species of Sasquatch, and in Alaska it's a different type of species of Sasquatch. Maybe it's mixed with something else. Who knows? Maybe they mate with bears. Who knows what their animology is? It could be that they could mate with other species for all we know.
Yeah.
And and they seem to all be different colors, Yeah. For instance, in Alaska, they're black. And in the Pacific Northwest, they tend to be dark brown, And then the skunk ape is tan, So yeah, I really do. I believe that they're different species. It would only make sense.
They wouldn't be blending in with their surroundings like the ones in Alaska wouldn't be snowy colored or.
You got me on that.
I thought I heard the ones in Canada were white.
I have not met one yet, but I would like to.
You think that with like polar bears do that.
Yeah.
They blend in with their surrounding. And then there's the Yeti, who was supposedly white or whitish, So, yeah. So, yeah, you got me on that.
Is the Yeti the same thing as the abominable snowman? Because this is all new to me. I'm learning all this. Okay.
Yes. So they say. And they also have a very oddly shaped head, which is almost like a cone-shaped head. And then they're said to have no neck, kind of like me, just, head and shoulders. But that's primarily what they say. No neck and a cone-shaped head, so they're kind of easy to tell because, every now and then you get a report to a forest ranger and it says, you've probably seen a bear walking on it as, it's 2 feet. And the guy says, no way. You know what a bear is, but these animals, the head, the cone shape it's like a feature that you can't miss on these animals, and that's how they say they defer them from bears or not. So who's to say? When you live up in the country and you're there all day and all night, you're so used to the wildlife. I mean, you'll know if it's a bear walking up on 2 feet or it's
Right.
a Sasquatch.
Right.
You're going to know the difference, especially if you're out there 24/7.
And the reason I've never seen a Sasquatch. I saw a Yeti once on the Matterhorn in Disneyland, but
You had me going there. I'm like,
I was waiting for this story. It was sounding good there.
but the reason I believe in Sasquatch, even though I've never seen one, is because of a friend of mine. I always tell this story. A friend of mine who was a seasoned hunter up in Washington State, went out hunting, I think for elk, and he was in his tree stand, and he said suddenly all the wildlife went silent. And one of these things walked out into the clearing, looked directly at him, and he said it smelled to high heaven. And then it stared at him and then turned around and walked back into the forest. And this is a guy who doesn't believe in this kind of stuff. He doesn't believe in this kind of stuff or ghosts or UFOs or anything like that. So I highly doubt he would tell a tall tale. And like I said, he was a seasoned hunter. And so he would know the difference between a bear and this sort of thing. He had seen bears walk upright, and he said it didn't walk like that. It walked like a human being with a slightly different gait. So yeah, that's why I believe that Sasquatch do exist.
do we have
I was
gorillas
telling
in those parts? Because they kind of have pointed heads and no neck, and they walk upright. And,
I missed your question.
do we have gorillas that live in these areas as well?
not upstate New York, not Pennsylvania, not Alaska, as far as I know. That's more like rainforest, I think, right? Gorillas?
Yeah.
Right.
I believe so. I mean, you'll have to double check. I'm almost positive it's rainforest. You would find them. Well, Africa, the Congo.
Mountain gorillas, I've heard of.
I've heard of different types of wild monkeys being in places like Florida and stuff like that. Like when you have a hurricane or a tornado, private zoos, open up and the monkeys get out and then they live out in the woods. It's very plausible that somebody had an ape in a private zoo or something that could have got out at some time and made its way into the forest. All those things are plausible. But if you look back at like the First Nations people, the Native American Indians, they have totem poles, going back hundreds of years, carvings of Bigfoot. It's like one of their legendary tales that goes back for centuries. And they believe to be, in other words, if you leave Bigfoot alone, he'll leave you alone. He's the master of the forest. That's their whole thing. And if you ever see one, it's supposed to be like good fortune and stuff like that. So, but why would they teach that stuff if there was no truth to it at all? Why would it even be a story?
Exactly. And the amount of time it would take to carve a totem pole, why would they carve this thing on these totem poles?
Right, and make it part of their everyday teaching.
Real. Yeah.
And they're teaching the kids, don't ever go into the forest alone, always go together. If you ever see one of these things, come back and tell an elder. These are real stories from Native American and First Nations people that they teach their kids. So why teach about a primate like that's bipedal and gigantic if it doesn't exist?
Yeah.
So now we're back
Makes
to
no sense.
He's an extraterrestrial, perhaps.
There's a lot of theories on this. He's extraterrestrial. He's interdimensional. He goes in and out of portals, or he's just an unknown primate to science that hasn't been found yet. Maybe he's not even a primate. Maybe he's more human DNA than primate DNA. Who knows?
And I think that the whole idea behind the portals is, it may not be just Sasquatch that are using these things. Maybe these portals exist and they just pop up once in a while in certain places. And that's, and then people go into this different realm and not necessarily where Sasquatch is, but just into a different realm. And I think the more I think about that, the more I think that that's a plausible idea you know? And so I don't think that Sasquatch are necessarily extraterrestrials. I think that they're probably interdimensional, you know, and they just learned how to manipulate these portals to get from one place to another, these wormholes. So, yeah.
Well, working on the interdimensional theory, have you ever heard stories, moving a little bit away from Sasquatch, about people, you know, going out for a ride in their car to go get milk from the store? You know, they take the same route they always took. Next thing, they made a right-hand turn, went down a block, and next thing, they were in 1940. The whole
Right.
neighborhood was like it was 1940. Did you ever hear stories like that before?
No,
I've heard
absolutely.
Yeah, the one
Right,
at
so-
Versailles. Yeah.
I've also heard a story about a guy fixing a sink and being underneath the cabinets in this lady's house fixing the sink, and he kept going a little further back underneath the cabinets, and next thing he went through the wall and he was in another completely different, you know, place. And when he got to the other side of the wall, he was with another guy fixing the sink that was like 30 years older than him. Then he realized the guy had the same tattoo on his forearm as him, and he realized he was with himself, but that guy was 30 years older than him.
Mhm,
And that story,
mhm.
the guy took pictures with that guy and everything, and then he came back. But these are all weird stories that you hear. Who knows how much truth to them there are, but it brings you back to that interdimensional type subject. Who knows if
I-
it's real or not?
Yeah,
Could
I
very
think
well be.
it would account for missing time as well. You know, a lot
Missing
of abductees experience missing time. Ralph and I experienced missing time once.
I've experienced it myself.
And I think, you know, I mean, it could be just a time differential, but I think these wormholes have a lot to do with it. And like I said, I think that they just pop up occasionally, and they don't always pop up in the same place. You know, there are certain places where they do, but for the most part, I think these wormholes change. So,
You know, I love when people tell me when I say myself, well, come on, how did you have missing time, right? How's that possible? And then I turn around to them and say, have you ever been driving in your car and you're just driving, you know, you're on a long drive, and then next thing you know, out of nowhere, you're there at your destination, you have no idea how you got there?
that's
That's the
exactly
same
what
thing
happened to
like
us.
same thing like missing time. It's very
Mhm.
plausible. It's very plausible that it happens. Who knows if
Yeah.
you're driving the car at that time and you were taken, and then next thing you came to, you were put back right where you were, and everything was the way it should be. Who's to say things like that don't happen? It could very
Yeah.
well happen.
I've
Ralph
had
and I
that yeah.
missed
Right.
2 hours.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah, I had that happen once. I stopped at a red light. I was the only car there, and I was going to meet my husband for lunch. I looked up and I saw something round. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. That's a UFO. And I was looking at it, and then the light turned green, and I went through. When I got to where he worked at, he's like, you know, where the hell you been? You're 40 minutes late. I'm like, no, I'm not.
Wow.
You know? I just drove straight through. But apparently I was somewhere for 40 minutes. You know.
Yeah, I lost over 5 hours in 1993 when I was 13. I was out riding my motorcycle, and I noticed I had stopped, take a break, and I noticed the triangle craft coming through, and I stopped and I'm looking at this thing and I couldn't believe what I'm looking at. And I was, you know, a kid. I was in amazement staring at this thing. And then one craft came off the top, and then there were two. And then the next thing I remember, my parents are screaming for me in the woods. My mom, my dad, my sister, they're all screaming my name. I'm like, I'm over here. My mother was screaming at me, where you been? We walked in here for hours looking for you. And that was at like 12 o'clock in the afternoon. This was almost 5 o'clock at night now, and the sun was going down. So I lost all that time, and I have no idea what happened in between. It was the freakiest thing that ever happened to me.
Well, there you
Pretty
go.
wild.
I mean, the people that have gone missing and have come back, they often say that they didn't know what happened. You know, sometimes these people have been gone for 2 weeks or so, and they have no idea how long they were missing. So I think that explains that.
Right, and who's to say if you go into a portal or something or you get taken It could be 2 weeks here, but the timeline there could be 5 or 6 minutes. You know what I mean?
Right.
You could cross over. It could be 5 or 6 minutes there, and 2 or 3 weeks here, or 2 or 3 hours here. Who knows what the time differential is when you cross over something like that? The
No.
time slippage. Yeah.
And some people come back and, as I mentioned before, they report going into a different realms that are like ours, but more beautiful. And they say, I don't know where I was, but I think I was in an alternate universe. So,
What's the longest we know of somebody going missing and then coming back and not knowing where they were? Do we have any information?
I don't know, to be honest with you, but the longest one I've known about was about a month.
Oh,
And
really?
that
I was going
happened-
to say Travis Walton, I thought, was the longest. But you know somebody longer.
Well, yeah, and the instance happened in the Nevada Triangle. And the people come back and I don't know where I was. I have no idea. I didn't even know I was gone.
Weren't there
Yeah.
like a squadron that disappeared in World War II or something? It showed up years later, or was it just the
The
planes?
five-
that showed up?
The 5
Yeah.
planes, yeah.
It was just the planes, not the people.
I believe it was the planes that they ended up finding years later,
Okay.
not the people.
Hmm.
But I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And that happened at the Bermuda Triangle, right?
Bermuda Triangle, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was also another story about a guy flying a Cessna. I believe it was either the Dragon's Triangle or the Bermuda Triangle. He went through a storm of some kind, and he described it as a vortex in the sky that he flew the plane through. And the flight was supposed to take him something like 3.5 hours, and he ended up getting to his destination in like 42 minutes when he went through
Yeah.
these different
Yeah,
Right.
that
time
happened in the
warp,
Bermuda
whatever you
Triangle.
call it. Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah.
So
But the really
You know,
interesting thing about that is when he filled up his plane again, the gas that would have been needed to travel that far, he didn't need that much. He only needed a
he
little
did,
bit.
right. So weird. But these things happen
Portals,
all the
man.
time. Yeah, portals. You should make up a shirt. It's portals, man.
Who's this here? Somebody said it's Pincer said that somebody went missing in Utah, 19 now, but was missing for 3 years.
Oh,
in
really?
Clear Lake. Yeah. But they don't know where he was yet. That's a long time, 3 years, to not know where you were.
Well, and I wonder if he knew that he was gone for 3 years.
Right. To him, it could have been a short period of time.
Right.
So,
I told this story to Damien the other night. I've told the story many times, but it dawned on me. My son, when he wasn't 2. He was about 18 months old, and I was living in this apartment complex, and I had to go in my house or something, and I had my daughter on my hip, and I asked my neighbor. Her son and my son were sitting on the front, the step of the door, having cereal, and I asked her. I said, "Do you mind watching him for just a second? I'll be right back." And I don't remember if I had to go to the bathroom or what. I don't remember why I walked away, and I came back, and he was gone. And so I asked my neighbor. I can't even remember her name. She's like, "He was just there." So he went missing, and we had everybody in the world looking for him. All the neighbor kids. It was relatively early in the morning. Neighbor kids are riding their bikes to the store because we used to walk to the store. And probably about an hour goes by. It could have been longer. It's been so long now. But the police ended up finding him at a nearby school. Somehow or another, we got the story that he was dropped off there. But when I'm talking to him, mind you, he's 18 months old, so his vocabulary wasn't there. All
Yeah.
I can remember is him trying to explain a woman, but he couldn't explain to me anything. And I'm starting to really think now that he was taken and dropped off at the school by anything. I mean, it could have been anything. I don't know, alien. I mean, I doubt it was a Sasquatch, or anything like that. But still, some kind of something must have happened then. I really do feel like it was just too weird because he couldn't have walked that far, or he wouldn't even known where the school was. It was just
Not
kind of
at
a weird
18
thing.
months old, right? No way.
Right.
Well, and abductions start to occur at a young age. So I think it's entirely feasible.
Yeah. So it's just been one of those things that's been ringing in my head the last few days. It's just going over and over and over again that may have happened to him, but I remember when he got a little bit older, I tried to ask him about it, and of course he had forgotten all about it by that time.
No recollection, huh?
Yeah. So
Very strange.
very unusual. Yeah. But you talking about a parent going nuts. And
I can imagine.
all my neighbor did was just turn her head. She literally just, turned her head and he was gone. So it's
and it happens just that fast too with the missing 411 stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
right.
Turn your head
And the other
gone.
little kid didn't know where he went either. The neighbor kid that he was sitting down eating with, he didn't know where he went either. So it was just, but again, he was another little one, maybe about 2. So, yeah. That they
That
can
was
just go
terrifying.
missing. Yes.
That's always been my
Well-
biggest fear.
Oh, yeah.
That's a
I think
horrible feeling to lose a child. That's the worst. Got to be the worst feeling in the world. Not knowing where they are, or if they're hurt, or if they're coming back. I mean, even for a couple minutes, I couldn't go through something like that. I feel for all the parents that go through a situation like that because it's terrible. It's terrible.
I've done that even with the kids at my school. Like I've had a couple of kids. If you don't know Anthony, I'm a first grade teacher. I've had kids leave my room without me realizing it because we're having some kind of brain break and we're playing a song, and a kid will leave the room without me knowing. Literally, I've just turned my head to start a song or something. And they leave the room, and I'm like going nuts. Where's my
instant
student?
panic attack. Yeah, of course.
Sure. So I mean, it doesn't even have to be your own kid. You just get this, oh my God, where's this kid? What happened? And, it's like, you cannot leave my room without telling me you're leaving. How many times I got to tell you? And we tell our kids that all the time, don't ever,
Don't talk to strangers, don't go here without a friend. Take your cell phone with you. Thank God today they have these kids, they have iPads and cell phones that they never leave their side. And we could program the technology, find my iPhone, and then we know where our kids at, and they don't even know we're tracking them. So maybe my son will know now that I mentioned it. But
I don't know what you're talking about
today. Yeah, right. Thank God.
When I first saw a kid with a cell phone, this was years ago, I thought to myself, what does a kid of that age need with a cell phone? But now they need the tracking device.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
They don't need
and
the
even
phone,
if you
they
make
just need
them
the tracking device. Yes.
right, but even if you make them think, "Hey, I have the phone," if you got to get in touch with mom and dad or play all the games and text all you want, but for us, for our peace of mind, we know there's technology on there where we can find them. God forbid anything. That gives you a little peace of mind. So.
Well, and that's the other thing about these national parks where people are going missing. A lot of times you don't have cell service in these areas.
Right.
So it's not as though you could text little Tommy and say, "Hey, where are you?"
Right.
Because he wouldn't get it, especially if he's in another dimension.
In the comments, I don't remember.
I don't think
who
they have
said
cell
it.
towers in other dimensions yet, Damien.
It's 5G.
Or maybe they do.
I don't know who did it, but in the comments, somebody was saying when they go hiking, they have an emergency beaker. But sometimes I even wonder, how that would, how well that would work. I don't, somebody would still have to. I don't know how those work. So if you had an emergency beaker, what does that do?
I had a Breitling watch that my dad had given to me. I forget what kind. It was a Breitling, but it was like a pilot's watch. And had a little red button on it. This was in case the pilot crashed. They could push the button on the watch, and it was a tracking beacon. So basically, it lets a signal up and they could track the watch basically. And
So,
I never used it, but I know that's what it was designed for.
So who would
I
be
think it's
receiving
smart
the
if you're a
signal?
hiker.
Right.
Yeah, they
but
have
who
all those
receives
kinds
the
of
signal?
things.
But
I think
who
it goes
receives
into
the
like a
signals?
national, it's some kind of database that goes
Oh,
into.
okay.
Maybe the watch company itself
Oh.
has a database for that specific thing, or the person selling, the device for the hiking company. They must have a company that monitors that specific device, right down to the avalanche pack. They have this school bag that you wear, and if the avalanche happens while you ski and the snowboard and you pull the thing, and it engulfs you in this balloon, and a beacon goes off, and it goes back to that company that made the avalanche bag. So I
Oh.
guess it goes back to the
Wow.
company itself. Yeah, they have a
That's
lot of
cool.
cool tech now like that.
That is cool.
So with that idea in mind, I wonder if these missing 411 cases are going to decrease because people are more likely to use something like that, especially if you're a hiker, so that people can be aware of where they're at.
I think they'll go down, but they won't stop because I don't think all of it is hiking accidents and stuff like that. I think there's more involved.
Yeah, because when I went hiking, I was prepared. I had the camel, I had my water, I had everything you could possibly think of. But if you're a little kid just running down to the creek, because mom's down there,
Yeah, that's
you're
a
not going to
different
have all
story.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to get out of here for the night. Anthony, as always, thanks for joining us. It's
Thank
always
you for
a
having me.
Anthony,
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Viewers, what are your thoughts on this? Leave a comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that little bell when you do, so you're notified each time we do this. We do this every Sunday and Thursday. And if you're new here, we talk about all things strange and unusual, not just, Bigfoot and UFOs, and please share this around. If you have friends that are into these topics, make sure you share it with them and share it with your socials on Facebook and Twitter. We would really, really appreciate it. So anyway, until next time, keep thinking and question everything.
Good night,
bye.
everyone.
Happy Easter.